Hey everybody, welcome to Popular Unknown Paintball Live. I'm really excited about today. It's had a few hiccups just getting to this point, so forgive me if I stammer a little bit because I'm kind of thrown off my game. Not that I'm not super professional anyway. Anyway, I have a great guest, but before I bring him on, a couple quick things. First and foremost, notice my little logos up front for the people that help out the podcast. I love it. Vulcan, MacDev, Push, Immortal Air, Transfuse. Can't really see it here on this, but when I shrink it down to the wheels, we've got Ultra Silk, we've got the Ally Remembered Foundation, and then please notice I have a link down below on how you can help out this podcast if you enjoy it with my Patreon account. I'd appreciate anything that you can give. I have a few tiers, t-shirts, stickers, hoodies, and I'm going to have a gun giveaway as well, but more on that later in a future episode. I'm not going to dwell on that right now. I have an amazing guest tonight, and I've been trying to get him on for a while. I'm super excited, and he's stepped away from his camera, so I'm not going to pop it up just yet. But my guest for tonight is John, the one and only John Dresser, Farside Hall of Fame, Pbnation Hall of Fame, and he's got an exciting new job. We'll get him to tell you all about that. And away we go. So let me introduce to you my guest for this evening, Mr. John Dresser. Hey, my friend, how are you?
Very well. Thanks for having me.
I've been trying to get you on for months now.
That is a lie. You've been dodging my calls.
I've been dodging your calls. All right. So first and foremost, I want you to know flat out, if there's anything you want to plug, be it in your businesses, you are more than welcome to at any given time. Don't feel like you have to hesitate. So I'm staring at those beautiful retro JT goggles in the background. I'm looking at your beautiful shirt. I'm looking at the jersey. I'm looking at your collected markers in the back mounted like Billy Bass. Like
that's exactly what they are. They're pistol. But I got the idea that they're pistol frames,
right?
Or, I guess not a frame, whatever they're called, plaques,
right?
But I stole the idea from at PMI. The general manager had fish plaques and then had the piranha guns up on the fish plaques.
Huh.
So I stole that idea directly from George Urich.
Well, that's awesome. I think it looks amazing. I may steal it from you.
Please.
This
remind me, and I'll try and look it up. But I like I said, if you Google pistol plaques, and then I just put little just screws in them from Home Depot.
Oh, okay. There you go. Well, that's awesome. So you're probably one of the most famous people in paintball in your own right, because so much information paintball wise has gone through you and through Pbnation, which you used to head up. And I know you still have something a little bit to do with Pbnation, but where did you start playing paintball?
I started in 1990 at a field called Splatters in Jackson, Tennessee.
Okay.
My older brother had played a couple times over in Memphis. And he then went to California and started playing a little more regularly with my uncle. Okay. And he came home to visit my parents and went to go play paintball with his friends. And I convinced him to drag me along.
Nice. And now, did you fall in love with it like the very first time, or?
I was in love with the idea of it before I even played. It sounded like the neatest thing I'd ever heard of. I'd seen a magazine or two. I'd thumbed through it and distinctly remember looking at a squeegee and thought that was for some kind of hand-to-hand combat. I was dying to play. I'd loved all kinds of outdoor sports. I'd played soccer competitively, and I'd loved like the old like Boy Scouts, running around in the dark, playing capture the flag kind of games. So I was all about it by the time I'd played. And Splatters was really smart. Once a month, they had a deal where as part of your entry fee, you got a gun rental. Okay. And that gun rental was a Splatmaster. So it was a single shot. Yep, exactly. But that same day, they also did, everybody had to play with a stock class gun. So it was a great way to get used to playing. It was a great way that you didn't have to worry about getting overshot. It was a great equalizer because there's no such thing as spray and pray.
No, there wasn't.
And the people, even the people that were good, there's only so good you can be with a Splatmaster.
You're not wrong.
So, and it turned out that that day, a friend of my brother's brought in a whole bunch of, I guess it would have been like college freshmen because it's
Okay.
3 years older than myself. And so there were a bunch of people that were there as first timers, a bunch of college kids, and they did the most traditional paintball thing ever. They put all the kids on one team and all the adults who knew how to play on the other team. And we played.
That was, and you just kept going back and back after that.
What I did is because that's how I was introduced to it, and because I knew that was playing down a little bit. I played basically once a month because that's how often they did it. So I played once a month for the next year on that specific stock class only day.
Gotcha.
And by then, even then in 90, 91, semis were coming out. Pump guns were infinitely better than stock class guns.
Yeah.
So this was definitely, even back then, playing with less technology.
My very first paintball gun, like I walked by a paintball store when I was in downtown, and it had just opened up. I walked in, and it was like, yeah, I got to play this. And I immediately bought all my gear. I bought a Brass Eagle Nightmare Competition short barrel because the guy said you can change to 12 grams faster. And I'm like, give me that. He goes, and you want to have the direct feed so that you can just put like a little, because I got the little War Game Products 45 loader. And I'm like, all right, give me that. UVEX goggles, the big wraparound PMI mask. And yeah, I went out. I took my buddy from high school, and he was like, yeah, it was fun. I don't really want to come back. And I'm like, oh, I'm so coming back next week. It was just,
I did something similar that after I played that first time with my brother and his friends, my brother went back to California. His friends played occasionally. I became good friends with one of them and played with him on and off for years.
Right.
But same thing. I drug one of my friends that casually wasn't against playing,
right,
but didn't love it. And in fact, that's to this day, I think that's one of the few people that has ever given me a paintball gift on Christmas or on my birthday or anything. He gave me, I think, some 12 grams and 200 round bag of paint or something for Christmas one year. And that was the best gift I got, I think.
Yeah, it still would be great.
Yeah.
So what was the first marker that you actually purchased for yourself?
I bought a used Phantom pump from the local tournament team. They were all upgrading the semis at the time. They were upgrading to basically F1 illustrators and such.
Right.
And so I bought one of their Phantom pumps, and in true to form, he stripped it down and gave me like the stock barrel instead of the Smart Parts barrel with it. And then upsold me on the barrel. So I had to go back and get that later.
True to form.
Paintball tradition, man.
It really is. Strip it of everything it's got and part the sucker out.
Yeah. So
that's
but the Phantom pump gun was my first gun, and then my second gun was an F1 illustrator.
Nice. I owned one of those too. I loved that thing. It shot so well.
Mine did not.
Really?
Mine shot okay, but I kept breaking the cocking arm.
Really?
Yep. And then over time, it just got less and less reliable.
Mine, like I was using it a couple times a month, and for summer, and it's one of the only guns I've ever sold that I regret selling, just because I enjoyed it so much. But I'll be honest,
long list.
But I'll be honest, once I got into autocockers, I don't think I ever had any interest in using a blowback ever again. So I missed the F1 just because I had so many good memories with it, but I don't know if I would, man. I don't think I would ever shoot it again, like ever.
That's I fully understand. Funny enough, my third gun was a P68 SC, so it was
Okay.
basically it was a stock class gun because
Yep.
I still played that pretty regularly, and so instead of renting that Splatmaster, I wanted something a little better. Wasn't smart enough to put a stock on it or anything, and then I think and then I started. I took my younger sister out to play by that point
Right.
a couple times. I let my, again, the most paintball thing ever. I let my younger brother shoot my Phantom at my younger sister before I took her to play. My younger brother was, I don't know, 10, 11, 12. And I was like, there's no way he can hit her. And he hit her with every ball he had until I basically tackled him.
Was he auto triggering?
Oh, just blowing her to pieces. Yep. And it was a fair distance away, but got her real good. And so I was like, well, I just convinced her never to play. And she was like, it's okay. I still want to play.
Awesome.
So it was funny with her because she never quite understood like the point of taking cover or anything else. She basically was just fearless, wandering around, killing people and getting shot, and then okay, walk off. So
have you ever noticed that with women when they play, there just doesn't seem to be a middle of the road. They're either super great aggressive, or the extreme opposite where they just hide, don't want to, they just cower. There doesn't seem to be any middle of the road. They just either seem to be full on aggression, great players that you just want to have, or they just don't at all.
no, I'm not sexist like that.
I'm not sexist either. I'm just saying there's no middle of the road. I'm not saying I don't like females playing paintball. I love females playing paintball. It just seems to be that they just don't seem to have a mediocre. They're either like full tilt boogie or no.
My wife is definitely in the no category. She has no interest, no desire, thinks it's ridiculous to get to run around like that in the dirt, and two to take the beatings.
Fair enough. And it really is kind of stupid. But so how long before it took you to get into team play?
I want to say right at the end, man. This was a long time ago, man.
No kidding.
It took me a year or two. I think what happened was there was a local tournament, and so I played that because that's what you did.
Right.
And we were terrible. It was a speedball tournament, so they made us play at 250 or below. None of our guns worked. It was pretty close up. Literally, we were the whole day we were just trying to get guns under the limit because they'd chrono us on, and they wouldn't allow any of us on. We'd borrow a gun or something. I remember one time borrowing a gun. Basically, the air was turned off, and it was an Allen wrench at the time, so it wasn't something you could change on the field. So the first couple shots got me over the chrono, but then after that, no good. And then immediately after that, a local team asked me to come play with them. So that first tournament was with one of my brother's friends again, a random guy,
right?
And then us just getting blown to pieces. And then right after that, a local team was playing the local series and picked me up to play that local series with them.
Gotcha. And how long before you started playing with Farside?
Oh, years and years. So I played with that team pretty much exclusively for years. Occasionally, I'd throw together a team to play a larger tournament or something but that team was called the Splatter Dogs.
Ooh, classic baseball name.
In true Tennessee fashion, or as redneck as possible. Two of the members were basically morning shock jocks. So all they did was talk trash the entire time to each other, especially me, other teams, the referees, anybody that would listen, they would just talk at.
Just your curiosity, are they still in paintball? Because they sound like great guests.
No. So let's see. We had a cop on the team.
Nice.
Who else? Anyway, but so played with them for a while. We played what was called the MSPA at the time, the Mid-South Paintball Association.
Cool.
And it was a large local series that would get 40 and 50 teams out. It would be a single day event. It was 5-man, and they would go from that 40 teams down to 8. So it was just cutthroat. You had to win all your games pretty much in the prelims. They cut it down to 8, and then 4, and then 2, and then 1. And then everybody went home. So
That's
it was
awesome, though.
Yeah, it worked well. There were no prizes. It was for trophies and bragging rights. But at the time, there were some really good teams. The Nashville Ridge Runners were one of the best teams in the U.S. at the time. Darksiders were another great team. And then by the time I stopped playing MSPA, the Saber Wolves were the up-and-coming team.
I think I've heard of them.
Yeah. So when I went to Farside, it was 98, the beginning of 98. And Farsighted, actually, first of all, what happened is we went to Skyball. Skyball was a tournament in Toronto at the Rogers Center at the time, called the Sky Dome. So it's one of the largest at the time indoor-outdoor facilities in the world. The Toronto Blue Jays played, whatever the Toronto basketball team at the time was played.
Raptors.
Was it?
Still, it's the only one.
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure if it had changed.
Nope.
So literally, teams would go in and you would watch the Raptors play the night before, and then they would take the court apart, take everything apart, put in paintball fields, and they couldn't start until assembling it until like midnight, because that's when their rental started. It would go from midnight to midnight a couple days later, and they would just crank out hundreds of games on basically carpet and blow up bunkers when they could get them to stay inflated, tire inner tubes when they couldn't.
Yep.
And the first year, nobody thought it was going to happen. It was announced, but it seemed so outlandish that paintball would be inside the Sky Dome. And who wants to go to Canada in January?
I'm already here.
Yeah, well, that's your bad life decision. So my team was invited to go play it by an acquaintance, this guy named Mark Davis, who made the Mark I autocockers at the time. And Mark, I'd met him a couple times and been really like, it was the most beautiful paintball gun I'd ever seen. So we were in the process, I think, of trying to buy some. And Mark called us up and said, "Hey, my paintball team can't play. Can you guys play basically, but you'll have to play under our name," which was the Scorpions.
Okay.
And my guys all said no and didn't ask me and just said, "It's not going to happen. Don't want to go to Canada to be locked out. Other things going on. It's not going to work." And just turned him down flat. So I hit up Mark, and I was a college kid at the time. And poor, and hit up Mark and said, "Hey, I know my guys said no, but I would love to if you're putting together a team." And he said, "I already have a team. I got the best amateur team in the world. I got Farside to come play as the Scorpions because it's paintball, so they'll do that for a free entry fee."
Right. Yeah.
So. And then I owe him a lot for this. And then he basically said, "We already have 5, but you can come. You're not the alternate. We'll all rotate out. And if they don't like it, fuck them. It's my entry fee."
Fair enough.
Like, are you sure? I don't want you to destroy this team that's all going to be better than me. And he said, "Nope, I'm dead serious." And this was somebody I did not know very well.
Right.
Told him thank you. And so I drove up from Tennessee to St. Louis, met him in St. Louis, and then we drove up the rest of the way, met the Farside guys in Chicago, and then drove some more. And eventually we were in Toronto. The tournament went off. I had a good event. I had a lot of fun. They had that first year, they basically had hurdles with netting over it or tarp over it as the center bunkers. And I would run up to those and just cause mayhem, and had a great time. And very much appreciated it and thought it was neat getting to meet pro players. It was neat getting to meet this high-end amateur team. And I went home. And a couple weeks later, they called me up and they're like, "So, want to come up to practice?" I was like, "Absolutely, I would love to." And practice went okay a couple times. I didn't have great practice, but I didn't have a bad one. And then they said, "Well, we don't need you at the next event, but we'll need you for Chicago." And I was like, "I'm in." Then the week before the next event, they said, "We lied. We need you for this event. Can you make it?" I was like, "Absolutely." And at the time, they thought I lived in St. Louis, which is a 4-hour trip from Chicago.
Right.
I lived in Tennessee, which is an 8-hour trip from Chicago. And they were a little hesitant with that. I was a little hesitant with that. But right after I was invited to practice, the Saberwolves called me. And again, I knew them, but wasn't really tight with them, liked them, and they were a better team than my team. And they said, "Hey," it was actually the owner, said that I want to redo the team. And I kind of want to redo it so my kids can play with me. Because he had 2 young kids, young, 13-ish, Caleb and Jacob Adcock. And he said, his name was Robin Adcock. He said, I want to play with my kids. I'm getting older. But I think if you're there, and I think if Justin Owen is part of this 5-man, that we can have a great 5-man, even with 2 little kids. He's like, and they will get astronomically better. And I was like, I loved the idea, but I told him the truth. I was like, I was just invited up to Farside's practice. I'm going to go try that. And he was very, very cool about it. He said, "I don't blame you. They're the best team in the world." But at the time, the Saberwolves could have claimed being the best amateur team in the world too, because they had just won. They'd been the first team ever to win the 5 and the 10-man Zap Amateur Open.
Nice.
Nobody had ever done that before, and they won the 5-man, and they thought, "Oh, we cursed ourselves because nobody ever wins both." And then they won both.
Yeah, I love Justin Owen. He's such a good guy. Now, I got to interrupt the story for just one quick second. We have a guy named Nima. He's asked you a couple questions, but he's actually watching us from Iran right now.
I am familiar with Nima. I've never met him, and I don't know if we're saying his name right, but I've talked to him online before, and he seems like a great guy, and he's definitely in a part of the country that you and I won't get to visit and go play paintball anytime soon.
Probably not. But I just wanted to make sure we gave him a shout out. And he wondered what your favorite country of all time was. So we might as well just answer that. Just so
my favorite country
to play in, yeah.
So I've been very blessed. I have gotten to play in the U.S., in Canada, down in Aruba, in Mexico, in France a couple times, in Malaysia, in New Zealand, maybe others. But that's honestly, traveling to play is surreal.
It is, isn't it?
It is absolutely nuts. And in every country, I was impressed with the hospitality. In every country, I was impressed with the players, that how far they would. It's a brotherhood, right?
Right.
So it's people you don't know taking care of you, and in a lot of those places, we needed taken care of for sure.
Yep.
Malaysia was probably the neatest one, and it's been a shame that their recent gun laws have been so strict and so brutal, because it went from literally the king of Malaysia would go to the event, and you'd ask, when does the event start, and they'd say after he leaves, when he's done. We're not starting until after he wants to come through and look around, and then we'll start. The Princess of Malaysia was there. I've never seen a country that where it was celebrated so much, and then where it, like I said, they made some laws that made it basically illegal for a bit.
I know absolutely nothing about that. All I know is that I've been enjoying paintball, traveling for paintball so much for last year. I made sure I added wings to my logo.
Nice. They, in fact, I want to say that a team from Iran won the year I was in Malaysia, but I'm not positive about that. but not something you see here. You don't see teams from Iran competing, and definitely
No.
wouldn't expect one to be so good.
So anyway, I didn't mean to just derail it. I was just excited to have somebody from Iran watching, and I geek out on this sort of thing. So I was just like, oh, let's work him in a little bit. And Nima, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and I hope I am, don't hesitate to reach out to me in private. Maybe we can arrange some sort of a show and get you on. And I think that'd be cool too, just to get somebody from around the world. I think that'd be wild.
I think he recently posted photos of the very first tournament in Iran. So that's something to hit him up about.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. So when did you get started with Pbnation?
Not for a long time. So in college, I ran a paintball field that was a competitor to the field I started at. So I ran a field called Adventure Games that was basically an hour closer from school. So I would come home or go to and play and run games at Adventure Games from college, and then I would play all over wherever I could. So I started working just basically as a referee, just running the field in the mid 90s. And then I took my first real industry job at PMI in 1999. And at the time, PMI was probably the largest paintball company.
Yes, it definitely was.
And it was very neat. The warehouse was right there. The tech support was right there on site. The sales guys were there. Just everything paintball was in that one building. And then PMI grew substantially as I was there, and it had these other satellite locations, and then it had 2 different locations in Chicago, and then finally they brought everything together under one roof. And that job was partially due to the late great Forrest Brown. Forrest started CPX. He started first he ran Challenge Park field for years, and then he started CPX. But Forrest owned Farside, and he was basically trying to make sure that I stayed on the team because he knew I was traveling from a long way away. And then I'd moved other places in the country at that point, and so wasn't going to practice, was just meeting them at events. And so he was trying to get me a little closer and get me a little more stable. So he was trying to get me to come up and work for Challenge Park as he was opening CPX. And he was like, it's not going to be working at a paintball field, John. It's going to be working at this whole thing, this whole new endeavor. Because CPX, when it opened, had BMX, it had skateboarding, it had mountain biking, it had all sorts of different things. But Forrest knew paintball the best.
Right.
So I was considering that, but not really amped at the prospect. And then before we'd worked out anything, before I'd even said yes or no, he's like, Forrest told me, he's like, I need you to come up to Chicago. I need you to come up on this day. I need you to meet with the guys at PMI. No idea who anybody there was. No, I didn't have any concept. I just knew that they made the paint that we shot, and knew that they were a big paintball company. So he said, come up. You have a job interview with them. I was like, for what job? And he said, I don't know. Go talk to them. Like, okay. So I went up and met up with David Freeman, one of the 2 founders, one of the 2 owners of PMI, and we talked for a long time. And he ended up offering me a job, and it was the same idea. I was like, so what all am I going to be doing? He said, I don't know. I was like, that sounds like a terrible idea. Sounds like a terrible reason to move here. And he said, no, it's not that I don't know. It's that, he said, we keep getting in these situations where we have to hire somebody, and we're desperate and we need somebody right away. And we grab the first person we can find, and it's not a good fit, or it's not a good plan, or it takes more training, or it takes more effort to get them up to speed. He's like, so I'm going to do something different this time. And he said, I think you're a smart guy. He's like, and I think we need more smart people here. And he's like, so I want to hire you, and then we'll find out where you fit. He's like, and you can give us input on that. And I was a kid, and I was dumb. And so obviously I said yes.
Obviously.
So at the time I was living, I'd lived in Florida and I was back in Memphis, which is close, a couple hours away from my parents, but a much larger town than where they live. So I literally in a weekend went up to Chicago. They told me that, hey, we're going to rent you a house and we're going to put you and another guy that we're hiring at the same time. So I got up there. I was like, okay, when does it start? Like, yeah, change of plans. You go find a place for you and this other guy you haven't met to live together. I was like, what? Like, who does this?
Paintballers.
Paintball. So the other guy was also named John. He had also just taken a job at PMI. He was actually working at the Florida location because that's where he was from. And then he was going to move up to Chicago. And apparently I'd met him, but I didn't remember him. And that guy just celebrated his 20th year working there. He is their sales manager. He has been working in sales the entire time. His name's John Rathman, and he's inside the industry. He is much better known than I am, probably, just because he's been doing it so long and he does it so well. He is even back then he was a huge advocate for his customers. So
now, does PMI still exist?
PMI has not existed for a long time, not since 2005.
That's what I thought. Like
PMI and National Paintball merged and became Key.
Right.
And Johnny went along. And then Key basically bought JT, but the guys from JT took over and Johnny went along. Then Key was bought out by GI.
Yep.
And Johnny went along again. And now GI is just restructured and become Core. And Johnny is still there. And basically he is the right-hand man to Billy Saransky. And at the time of PMI, Billy was there as well. So I worked with both of them, and they're now possibly the two most powerful people in paintball, the two most influential. They are very significant within the paintball industry. And so, and now instead of being a sales guy, Billy is running the company. He's just became the CEO of Core.
Nice.
So, yeah, he is. Everything is on his shoulders, and I know if you've ever talked to somebody that's on the corporate side, but doesn't play paintball or isn't familiar with paintball, there is sometimes a huge disconnect in what they think paintball should be and what they think paintball is versus the reality of it.
Yes.
And one of the huge advantages with having a paintball guy actually in charge, not high up, but actually in charge, is huge.
It is.
I'll be the first to admit that when I was a kid and took that first job at PMI, Billy and I didn't always see eye to eye, but I put a lot of that blame on myself. I was an idiot. And
funny how that works.
It's funny how that works. And I think he's matured a lot as well. But honestly, if you don't have somebody that understands paintball very well, very high up, I don't know how it works. There are other things that somebody else can bring to the table that has other life skills. But paintball is an interesting animal. And one of the advantages and disadvantages of paintball is you deal with a lot of other paintball people at every level. And Billy is definitely skilled in that.
I'm not sure if I've met him or not in my travels. I'd like to, but I'm not sure if I have.
Well, Billy back then was arguably the best player in the world.
Definitely one of them. Yep.
In 99. And it was before the new wave of Oliver and younger kids.
Right.
But Billy was definitely, when it was still in the woods, it would be impossible not to put him in that top 10.
Absolutely.
The best player in the world. Played for Aftershock at the time when they were winning every other or most World Cups. Aftershock at that time was one of the top 3 teams. There was the All-Americans, the Ironmen, and Aftershock.
Yes.
And it be impossible to to not give credit to all three of those teams.
Correct. Yeah. And yeah, I used to love reading the magazines back then. Like I would just wait for each magazine to come out and started following Warpig a little bit once they got up and rolling. But yeah, between Aftershock, the All-Americans, and Iron Men, I gotta admit, I tended to fall more in I was rooting for Bob Long in the Iron Man camp. That seemed to be where I was the most. I'm not sure why, but they were all equally great.
They all definitely had their own style. They all had their own look. They all, at the time when I started following it, all three shot different guns because it was before Aftershock switched over to autocockers. And then I guess I was from the Midwest, so Chicago was closest. So I was possibly in the Aftershock camp, but I definitely wasn't in the Iron Man camp. That, just didn't run into them. Funny enough, I did at one point get to practice with Bobby's Iron Men,
right,
out in California, and then was a big fan of Weasel, who started playing again, Dave Cook, and then and a lot of those guys. That it's been fun to watch paintball for so long that people have come back to it.
Absolutely. Like I'm really excited. I was really excited for this year. And I don't want to dwell on the whole COVID thing, but I was really excited for this year because there were so many possibilities and there was so much that was going to happen. And there was so much on deck, both with me and the mechanical movement and do you know what I mean? Like it was just so much. I was so excited. And then obviously none of it happened, but I'm really excited to see what happens in 21 because I really think that there's a lot of that stuff that we wanted to do is going to happen. And I honestly think that after having paintball taken away from us more or less for a year, I kind of see 21 exploding, like everybody just charging out of the gates.
I hope so. There's definitely potential, but we're definitely not quite out of the woods yet.
No, of course not.
So I guess your question that I completely failed to answer was how did I establish myself with Pbnation? And so I worked for PMI until 2005. And then I wanted to move down to St. Louis and they didn't want me to work from a distance. So that didn't work out. And started with a small startup called Lucky. And then, and we were one of Pbnation's largest advertisers at the time,
right?
Just because we realized that is where our customers were 100%. That it was nuts. That they weren't in magazines, they weren't anywhere else, but they were on Pbnation. And I'd been running the tech department, some R&D at PMI, so I was very familiar with Pbnation.
Right.
I'd actually dealt with them many times. In fact, I was a moderator on Pbnation. But with Lucky, it was sometimes an adversarial relationship. We were spending money, but we also thought that we should have a little more rights than the average user because we were spending money, and the rules weren't well defined. And so we clashed with, at the time, the owner of Pbnation, Ed Ricker.
Okay.
So I met Ed at a tournament, and I guess he had threatened to ban all of Lucky forever from the site. And so I was yelling at him, and he was like, no, you're spending money. We're good now. And I was like, but I'm not done yelling at you. Cause I was upset that he had switched 180 degrees so quickly. And I was like,
right.
You can't do that. It's not good for paintball to be so adversarial, basically, with people that are on the site. And so as Lucky fell apart in the following year, Ed called me and asked me what my plan was, and told him the truth. I didn't have one. And he asked me, it's like, how well do you handle a non-structured work environment?
You mean paintball?
He meant Pbnation, which was even less structured than paintball at the time. It was the Wild West. When I came aboard, the talk was we need to make a new Pbnation shirt that says "Drink bleach," because that was one of the most common insults and common sayings on the site. Was telling some other random 14-year-old kid to go drink bleach. So I worked with them on the advertising side. I worked with them on their volunteer moderator side. I did more and more for Pbnation on the front, on the customer facing side.
Right.
I did none of the programming, but worked with two great programmers, Kyle and then Ed's son Tony, and they were fantastic. They pushed the limits of what the site could do. They added all sorts of custom programming, and they basically made the site what it was, which was significantly more than any other vBulletin site. And the site got bigger and bigger and bigger due to their efforts. So it went, at one point, it was one of the largest sports forums in the world, if not the largest. So it became this monster, but at the same time, like I said, you have to talk to paintball people a certain way. So they had none of the largest paintball companies advertising. They didn't get it. They saw it as the Wild West. They saw it as kids being mean to each other. They saw it as them getting roasted when they tried to partake, and they were not about it. And funny enough, one of the first people that figured it out was Saransky. That dealing with him at Key, he got it. He didn't necessarily personally understand it or care to be part of it, but he understood that's where a lot of his customers were at that point. And so they were one of the first big paintball companies that helped out with the site. And then Planet Eclipse came along later, and
Right.
others as well. So it was, I was there for a very long time. I think 2007 until this year.
Right. And you've moved up, and I definitely want to talk about your new job in the near future. Maybe get you, maybe see if I can get your name up there on the list. But we can talk more about that in private.
Fair enough. Go on.
Actually, I wanted to thank you again for the lenses for the goggles that I was rebuilding.
Yes.
I want you to know that my niece, Jordan, she was really excited to play paintball this year. Obviously, it didn't happen, but all she wanted was a pair of goggles. And so she is now proudly sporting those goggles, and that is going to be her first set. And so I just wanted you to know that those lenses that you sent to me have gone to my niece, and that goggle system that I completely rebuilt, she is super excited.
That was my pleasure. That was an interesting deal. Just a stranger on the internet that had unsafe goggles, and I happened to have some lenses, so mailed them to Canada.
And yeah,
and that was well before you had this show. That was well before I didn't even know who you were, but it was.
Well, I did have the show to a degree, but it was audio only.
Oh no. This was before that.
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I will bet you on that. Because I watched, I was like, hey, that's the guy I gave some lenses to, and now he's starting a show.
Yes.
So I paid attention as you did that first, as you started, and then as you've grown it, and then as you're still doing it.
Yeah, I'm still growing. I'm really enjoying this. Like
I would hate every minute of it.
Oh, really? So you're not enjoying this right now?
Oh God, no. This makes me horribly uncomfortable. I'm a very quiet person. I'm a very private person. This is not in my wheelhouse whatsoever. The videos I do for Pbnation did not, like I said, not a fan of those either. I did them because I didn't have anybody else to.
Right.
And I loved, as a kid, I loved new gear. As a kid, I definitely bought some of the wrong gear. There wasn't anything at the time, aside from maybe John Amadea in PCRI that came out a couple of years later. But there wasn't anybody warning me of what not to get. There wasn't the backbone of Pbnation for all those years we called third-party reviews. So it's
Right.
basically a review by somebody you don't know, that has no reason to mislead you. And through Pbnation, obviously we had advertisers and we had other issues, but still a kid. I still love seeing new gear, still love seeing new equipment, still love being part of that, and desperately wanted Pbnation to stay relevant, and realized that as a forum, social media was going to kill it. That social media was changing, first with MySpace and then with other more successful forums. But by the time Facebook gained any traction whatsoever, like this is going to be the end. Because I definitely saw them as the enemy, saw them as a rival, saw them as somebody that we couldn't fight. And it took me a couple of years to realize that they could in turn feed the site. So for a long time there, Pbnation had the most active and engaged Facebook, had far and away the largest YouTube channel, had respectable Twitter and respectable Instagram. And I didn't start any of those on time, was always super late to the party.
Right.
And with video and with YouTube, it was one, because could not believe the idea that a free video platform was going to rule the world. Because that sounded like a great way of attracting all sorts of garbage, which it did. All sorts of terrible people, which it did. But over time, they monetized it, and they were one of the guys that figured it out. And so, like I said, I was years and years late to the party for starting Pbnation's YouTube. And then we got the best in the business to run it, Pat Spoor, who owned Monkey with a Gun.
Right.
We've done Serial Killers and Push and all these incredible movies.
Oh, I own most of them.
I own them all. Heroes for a Day just went up on YouTube, so if you haven't seen that, go watch it.
The Excessive Story.
The Excessive Story.
Yeah.
So, again, I realized that these could all feed Pbnation, and that was a way for the site to survive, and did for years and years, when it was no longer the king, but it was still significant because of all these other pieces that were significant.
Right.
So it was it was fun to be part of Pbnation for so long. The site was sold a couple times, and each new owner had a new vision for what it should be. And the current owners are Vertical Scope up in Toronto.
Oh, cool.
So I would come up to Toronto once or a couple times a year. And they actually are just blocks away from the Sky Dome,
right?
From the Rogers Center. They actually have a huge, not a whole building, but most of a floor in a downtown Toronto office building, just because they own thousands of sites. And I was the only paintball aficionado there, so it was an interesting tenure, to say the least.
I bet. Well, if you don't like making videos, don't hesitate to reach out to me in private and say, "Hey, Steve, can you do this?" Chances are I can, and I will try.
Fair enough. We will see. We'll see how that all works out. We'll see.
Hey, I'm not asking you to commit to nothing. I'm just throwing my hat out there, saying if you need help or you want somebody, I kind of like the limelight a little bit.
Fair enough. I do not. I very much enjoyed with Pbnation that nobody knew who I was for years, unless you were in the industry, and then you knew that a lot of people knew that I had been in the industry for years.
Right.
They knew that I had played professionally for years. They knew about me, but the kids on the site had no clue, and that was fine. And at events, I didn't get recognized until by anybody that wasn't old, until I started doing videos, and then it was funny to see how my conversations at events changed.
So you have a new job now.
I do.
And I'm guessing that the JT and all that, are you gonna tell us?
It is part of it. I just took over as the marketing manager at Core Outdoor, who has JT under their umbrella, Empire, and GI Paint. I also have Spider. They have some of the most Tippmann, the most iconic brands in paintball.
Yes, they do.
And so it's I am getting used to the idea. They have more going on than I possibly dreamed. They have more people. They are involved in more parts of paintball, and they are more dedicated. Just some incredibly hardworking people.
And are you happy to be there? Like, are you
Yeah.
excited?
It is a paintball dream job for sure, but it is a job and a half. So it is very interesting, and I didn't think I could be taught a lot within this industry, but definitely have a lot to learn.
Now, you used to be posting a lot of stuff with PB Retro. Now, is this something that's yours, or is this like an agreement? Like, what's that?
PB Retro was my side idea when I was still at Pbnation, that I had talked to the guys at JT, and I loved that brand, and I thought that in my mind they weren't doing enough with that brand, and in the reality they were still just spooling it up. They were still getting and doing more and more with it, but behind the scenes.
Right.
And so they basically told me to put my money where my mouth was. And they said, if you want to do a goggle color, it's buy this many, and it's a lot. And it was a bit of a challenge, and so I decided to go for it. Well, during that time, before I got in fact, right before I got the sample of the goggle, I decided I can't be selling these and keeping track of everything. I need to start a site, need to start a name, need to get organized. So I built a tiny little site called PB Retro simply to sell these goggles. And they sold out in 12 days.
Nice.
They sold out incredibly fast. But I still had this little site, so I've been doing other things with it, and it's again taught me more about it. I've learned a little bit more about JT, and JT was one of my first sponsors with Farside.
Right.
JT was a sponsor before that with the team that I played a whole one NPPL event with the Timberwolves back when I lived in Tennessee. JT's been integral to paintball since the 80s, since before I was playing at all, since before I even thought about playing.
They were my first purchase after when I stepped out of UVEX.
Yep. I was lucky enough to meet John Gregory several times, the guy that started JT. And then now it's very cool to me that JT is still going strong, that I've lost count of how many resurgence it has had, but there's been a more recent one with X Factor, and then with some of these private label goggles. And then JT is just a fun, interesting brand to me. And I've worn JT goggles for probably more than every other goggle combined in the now 30 years that I've been playing.
I was diehard JT until I got a cheap pair of Scots. And I don't know if you can see in the camera, but my nose is kind of...
Every pair of Scots was a cheap pair of Scots.
No. But I got the lower end one, but they fit my face so well, and it was really light.
Different prices for them.
Anyway, I really liked those. And then when I came back into paintball, I really fell in love with Push. But I can't say enough great things about JT, and I still own about 5 pair. And I've got one of the old leather jackets that JT had.
Yep.
And I still wear that on a regular basis. I love that thing. I get up and get it. It's like around there, but I don't want to interrupt the show.
We don't need to see what's behind the curtain.
But
so how long were you gone from paintball?
My dad passed in 1999, and that was a bad year for me because my dad was diagnosed and passed away with cancer. My mom had open heart surgery. My grandmother spent 6 months in the hospital, and the girl that I was dating, and we were really serious, her and I broke up. Like it was a bad 12 months. So I stepped away for a little bit just to get my head right, because when I went out on the field, I actually wanted to hurt people. Like you know, when you get in tournaments and you get that aggressive and you're like, I'm just going to mug somebody, and it's the point blank. I wanted to do that in rec ball, and I'm not that guy. And I just said, you know what? If I'm bringing this negative energy, I got to step out for a second. And so I left for a little bit, and then I started coming back, and I got asked to manage a field called Phaser Zone here in Oshawa. And it was really cool because it was not an actual paintball field. It used paintball equipment, but it had radio vests, and you would hit it with glow in the dark silicone like rubber balls. And so
Okay.
the whole room was all black lights, and so it was like being in a Star Wars fight. Like the balls were glowing, they're flying at you. They would hit the rubber vests, and it would go scoring. The problem with that is they wanted that to be for birthday parties, and what they didn't realize was that these rubber balls, because they wouldn't break, all that kinetic energy would hit kids and hurt. And so I was hired on as a manager, and I was tweaking, repairing, trying to get that velocity down so people weren't killing each other. And I started having practice nights through the winter. So local paintballers were able to come and play indoors with reusable balls. So it was $15, come on, use what you can, here you go. And then we would wash them, and people would just come for a few hours. They'd play. We had to chrono at like 200 feet per second because it was lower, and because of the kinetic energy, they didn't use the vests. It was just sort of like glorified airsoft, if you will. But it was cool because you were playing in black lights, and it was a trip. I can't even begin to tell you how cool it was. I got rid of all the bunkers. Couldn't stand them because they were all plywood, and so when people would go into them, because of the thing, like screws would be shot out. So I got old tires, and I bolt them all together so they were solid rubber, so they couldn't break apart. And then I used an old skyball trick, and I had the sleeves put over it. So all these bunkers now are all these glow in the dark barrels. It was awesome. After that, they closed down because they just couldn't make enough money, because if you can't get birthday parties in a whole business designed to cater to birthday parties because kids are getting hurt, it just didn't fly. I started managing Area 51 paintball field, which is an indoor field, and it was really cool up here in Toronto. And I managed that for almost a year, but that didn't end well, and I don't want to go into it, but typical paintball fashion, we'll just leave it at that. I don't want to badmouth anybody. That's not my thing. But at that stage of the game, I had walked away. So that was mid 2000s, I would guess. I'm not sure the exact year. Mid 2000s.
But
and then I
play from that 2000 to 2000 whatever, or were you just working?
So I was just managing, but I wasn't actually playing tournaments and stuff, but I was doing more with the fields and things. But I never really left because I was still buying magazines whenever I could. And I was still going online at least once every couple weeks and just reading up what was happening. It was in my blood. And then I got married, or engaged to be married. She had no interest in me playing paintball at all. I got out a couple times, but it just wasn't worth it. And I was an instant dad because the lady had a 1-year-old, and I was trying to be an adult. That was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life.
It's overrated.
So I walked away, but I never really left. I was always reading. I was always trying to get the movies. I was always just trying to follow along with the stories. I just wasn't on the field, if that makes any sense at all.
No, I think there are a lot of people that they left, but paintball never left them. And so now, as they're having kids, or as this retro movement or this mechanical movement, as they're finding that excuse to come back, or they're reminded that paintball doesn't have to be traveling and playing competitively, that they can be playing for fun. They can maybe afford it a little bit more easily now in their as they're more advanced in their career.
I think that was my biggest problem is I think I got to a point where the bunkers were getting smaller, the games were getting faster. I was older, obviously, because I mean I started playing 89 and I was 19. So, and as you know, a majority of actual sponsorship is in the States. When you play outside of the States or in, depending on what state you're in, a lot of your sponsorship isn't like what it was back then. It was more you're funding your own way. You're funding your own, like it's all coming out of your pocket. And I wasn't having fun in the tournaments anymore, and it was too expensive. And I just didn't feel like there was a place for me in tournament paintball anymore. I felt like, because at that time, a lot of the kids that were coming onto the teams were like 15 years old, 16 years old, and they were tiny and they were fast, and they had rich parents. I just wasn't having fun. And then when I would try to go back to playing rec ball, I found that I was too aggressive, I was too fast, I was too whatever, and I didn't want to do that to new players. So I was getting bored, if you will. Now I'm fat, old, and slow, and I can play rec ball just fine because I'm nowhere near the quality I used to be. So, but yeah, so I stepped away. Let's say 2005 is when I walked away, but I never really left because I was always reading. I was always, every so many months, I can remember being married. She's like, "Did you just buy another magazine?" I'm just like, "Well, yeah." It's like, "Well, when are you going to give that up?" So, yeah, after I got divorced, took a couple years, and then I went out to Trevor Van Dorser's field, Combat Pursuit, which is just 15-20 minutes away. And I had bought, I didn't want to use my old gear. I wanted to use something a little bit newer because I didn't want to go through all the hassle of trying to completely rebuild cockers and get the parts. And so I went into a pawn shop and I picked up a Etho 1, Planet Eclipse Etho 1. And I got that all working. I think I got that and a halo and a little steely tank. I think I got for the whole thing for like $150. I had to get some new seals and some new baldy tents. But man, that was so much fun. Just stepping on it felt like I never left. And the weird part was, when I got out there was two guys that were amateur tournament players, and they played together all the time. And so there was just the three of us. And typical paintball fashion, as you like to put it, they're like, "Do you guys want to go out and just horse around on the speedball field while we wait for the rentals and whatnot to come?" Because we were there early. And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Like, and so I shuffle off or waddle off because I'm fat, old, and slow. And I turn to the guys and I'm like, "So how do you guys want to break this up?" And go, "Well, we figured it'd be us two against you." And I'm like, "Really?" I haven't played in 10 years. I don't know my gun. You guys are tournament and you want to play me? And they're like, "Yeah. All right, I'll take a beating." And I rolled them. I was laughing. I'm still laughing about that. Anyway, just smoked them. But yeah, I still have the Planet Eclipse too. I love that little gun. I don't know why people don't give the Etho enough credit. I don't think, like the Etho ones. I just love that little thing.
Fair enough.
So what's your favorite gun right now? I know you are an autococker guy and I watch you collect, but do you have one favorite gun that stands out above all others?
No.
Really?
No.
You don't have one that's got more your sentimental attachment to?
No.
They're just all tools to you?
No, lots of sentimental feelings for lots of different guns. Autocockers are some of the neatest guns on the planet for sure.
Right.
I've definitely shot my share of them. I own a couple iconic autocockers. from the years. I have a Splatmaster that was signed by Bob Guernsey.
Cool.
I've never shot it, but that's a cool one that's hanging up in my office somewhere. I have a Nell Spot that has also never been shot. It's hanging signed by the guy that developed the Splotchmacher maker, however it's pronounced.
Right.
I've got a couple guns behind me, including an RT and a couple autocockers. In fact, most of the collectible guns I have are autocockers.
Right.
But own a couple others. That I guess I'm a fan of not just autocockers, but just this game in general.
Right.
That I enjoy. Not some of the collecting, but I definitely enjoy being a fan of so much of it, and I think that's where it develops from. I own a chunk of jerseys just because, not because I'm a fan of jerseys as much, but because I'm a fan of those eras that those jerseys came from, and I think that's similar for guns. That I'm a fan of that autococker era, that mechanical era,
the late '90s.
Yeah, when I was a kid, and those were guns I couldn't afford. And so it's been fun to collect some of those, and now as more people are getting up to that age and have that same fondness, it's been fun to watch other people collect them as well. And now you're seeing the same thing with jerseys and I fully expect to see it at some point in a couple of years with the early electronic guns. But it's favorite is a hard word.
So you don't have one that you use for tournaments that are just special to you with all the memories?
No. As a kid, I always kept the same gun for tournaments for years and years and years because I was a firm believer that if you use the same one, it's natural to you. And honestly, there wasn't a gun to replace it that next year.
Right.
There wasn't a new model. There wasn't a new something that was better. So shot the same guns for years, shot autocockers, shot auto mags. With Farside, we got to shoot prototype stuff for Airgun Designs because Schreiber worked for Airgun.
Right.
And so that was fun. The RT I have behind me is actually RT number 1 that I shot for years on Farside. It was all hacked up at the time, and it was small, but the valve in it was the first production valve ever made. I believe Ed Head off Jacksonville was the original owner. And when he passed away, at some point, it went back to Airgun or went to Schreiber or somehow circled back around. But with Farside, the team. Schreiber was notorious for when you give him your gun to get worked on, God knows what you'd get back. It would be Airgun Designs product, but like an idiot. When I first joined the team, I was shooting an autococker, and all the guys on the team were gently giving me grief. Like, if you give Jeff an auto mag, he'll make it the best shooting auto mag you've ever shot. I was like, well, I've shot an auto mag way more than I've shot an autococker. I'll give him a mag. And so I went and bought one from a friend that was really nice. It was this Teflon black mini mag, looked new, it was gorgeous. Gave it to Jeff, and I got no part of it back but the foregrip. He stole everything else. And the gun I got back was shot way better. It was obviously one of the guys on the team's old gun. We were sponsored by JT, but they'd been sponsored by Scott for years.
Right.
And you could still read Scott down the side of it because from the sticker that had been peeled off. And
right.
And so occasionally I would give my gun to Jeff, and there would be some new part on it or some new something. And one time I gave it to Jeff and got back an RT. Had an auto mag, got a completely different gun, but the valve that was in it was that number 1 valve.
I think Superman just said there, yeah, dibs. I think he wants it.
Yeah, that's Jake.
Yeah.
So I shot RT number 1 for years on Farside, and then when Jeff no longer worked at Airgun, it was long past electronic guns had taken over. But I was still shooting a mechanical gun, just kind of in support. I'd even played I'd played with the EMAGs, but didn't love them. I'd actually played a tournament with Tom Kay, where we shot mags, and where he wanted us to shoot the EMAGs, and I just kept breaking paint, and so I just put it aside and just got my gun out. And so that gun just went in the bag for years, and then this last year, 2 or 3 years ago, excuse me, I rebuilt it with original parts. So now it has the original Euro power feed and other goofy things, and weighs twice as much as it did, and has the single trigger because for whatever reason those came with single trigger, even though double triggers had taken over. So it's definitely a neat gun. I'm glad I held on to. And now it's, as I am old and sentimental, it's definitely a cool one.
Nice. I have a 97 autococker, and it's the first new autococker that I bought, and I think it's the only new autococker that I bought.
97 and 9, they redid the autococker. That's what
I beg your pardon?
With a cut back block, and they changed it up. And
the 97?
Yep.
Yes. And then they redid it again in 98.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got the 97, and everything on it has been, well, let's put it this way. The only thing stock on it is the back block.
Yeah.
And that's only because I never got around to drilling it and tapping it to put a set screw to keep the cocking arm from spinning. That's the only modification it doesn't have. And that's only because I haven't gotten around to it. I still may. So
I won a 90. I won a tournament where the prize was 97 autocockers for everybody. And let's see. And it was engraved with the tournament on the side of it. And so what I did is I had a pump gun at the time. And so I put all the pneumatics on my, I basically switched the pneumatics and my pump gun. So I basically ended up with a pump, but still had the engraving from this tournament that we won.
Right.
And I gave that to a friend, and man, I want to say like 11, 12, 13, 14 years later. So I gave that to a friend to mill up. He never did. It sat, he did other things. And like 14 years later, he contacted me. He was like, so I still have that gun. And he's like, do you want me to mill it up? And I was like, absolutely not. I want it back as it is. So that's another one that I miraculously held on to through no matter what I tried. So he teases me that he asked for me to vouch for him at some point online. He was like, yeah, you can. I was like, so I can tell him that gave him a gun, returned 14 years later, no work done. But no, it's I haven't kept many from day one, but I did keep the first paintball gun I ever shot. My brother went and played in Memphis, came back with 2 PGPs,
right,
and no goggles, because that's what you do. And so we walked around the neighborhood with these 2 PGPs and shot at a mailbox or whatever we shot at. And then he showed me, he's like, see, it doesn't hurt. And I thought he was setting down a plastic box because it had this sheen to it and it was yellow. And the ball clearly just went right through it. And I was like, nope, not shooting me with that thing. There's no way. It was a cardboard box, as it turns out. But it scared me enough that I had no interest in who knows what it was shooting. But I still have one of those PGPs.
Right.
It was in a box at my parents' house, and found it just a couple of years ago, and was very excited to have the original gun I'd ever shot.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep. It's a good one. It was actually a rental gun at a Memphis field. And when my brother went and played there at that Memphis field, they were getting rid of their rental PGPs. So he bought 1 or 2. I think he bought 2 of them.
Gotcha.
So I guess there's a 50-50 chance it was the first paintball gun I ever shot, but I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, it counts. I say that counts.
I think so.
Oh, I had so many questions. There's just so many questions. And they're all just.
That's okay. I appreciate you having me on. It's definitely been fun. This has been a long time coming for sure.
Oh, you want to get off already?
Say it that way, phrasing. But what would you like to talk about, Steve?
Well, the one last thing that I definitely wanted to hit on was, how are you enjoying playing now? Because I played World Cup for the first time this year.
Okay.
Granted, it was D5 3-man, and I got rolled like toilet paper.
It's pretty much the same as Pro. It's virtually identical.
But no, it's not even close. And I know that. But thank you for trying to make me feel better. But either way, I got smoked. But it was, when I walked away, there was a certain way I felt. And I didn't feel like I belonged. And when I came back this year, or the last couple of years, and I got actually chance to play D5, or not D5, I got to play at World Cup. It was probably one of my greatest paintball thrills ever, just because I hit World Cup. Thank you, Ryan, for saying I did fine. I know I did fine. But my question is, are you still loving playing as much as you always did, or?
I still thoroughly enjoy playing. I still play most weekends here in St. Louis. I definitely don't travel as much to play. Got a family. I still, one of my best friends is my rec ball buddy, Brock Jolliffe, who I used to play against and then was lucky enough to play on the same team as for a couple of years.
Right.
And then, but I definitely don't, it's definitely a different feeling. I still enjoy it. Still fun. Still definitely play dumb sometimes, play aggressive sometimes, I probably play more in the snake now than I did when I was playing competitively, and just enjoy it. That St. Louis has an incredible paintball community. That there are lots of players. There's an amazing amount of fields in St. Louis. I want to say there's 7 or 8 fields that are all distinct and a little different, and there are lots of players that whatever the premier airball field is, and that's changed several times over the 15 years I've lived here. So that's it's been funny to see how the field that attracted the tournament guys was a different field, and now the current fields that I play at are Extreme, which is more of a rec ball field because Brock has a son that plays, and so he plays with us out there. And then he's just now 13. He's just now old enough that he's playing airball with us as well. And there's a fantastic airball field here called Adventure Valley it's possibly the nicest field I've ever played at anywhere in the world as far as the turf and the airball bunkers. It's a beautiful field to play on.
Nice.
And they don't have the rec ball fields that fields like Extreme have, but then there's other fields like Gateway here that I play at as well. And those are probably the 3 I play at by far the most. But they're not the only 3 fields in St. Louis by a long shot.
But they're the ones you like the most, and you play all the time, which is great. Well, that was what I needed to know. I really wanted to know the most. Is there anybody that you'd like to plug? Anything you'd like to give a shout out to? Anything you want to say about the new thing coming out with from GI? Maybe because you're the promotions guy, maybe you can promote a little something.
There is too much. There's so many people that have helped me along the way. There's so many releasing this goggle. The community has been overwhelmingly positive. That it's been very fun to listen to people getting excited about building JT goggles the same as I was excited about it well over 20 years ago when I got my first set. The first set of flexes that I got were literally out of the back of John Gregory's trunk. That I was watching the Iron Men play at the Chicago NPPL, at my first NPPL event, and there was an older guy next to me and was talking with him and then afterwards there was no netting,
right.
Sidelines as we walked away, he knew I was wearing JT goggles, and he's just like, do all your guys wear JTs? And I was like, yeah, and so I was figuring out where this was going, and so he introduced himself as the guy that started JT. So, and then he said, "Well, come over to my car," and he pulled out the clear flexes that I don't think I'd even seen them yet.
Nice.
And just had a stack of them. He's like, "Make sure all your guys get them," and was just the nicest guy in the world. And that obviously made an impression. And that is a legacy I would like to see us continue, of that guy that was, he was sitting there watching that, like I said, the Ironman play on the sidelines, that he was interested in. He didn't play. He was older at the time, even then. But it made an impression that he was still excited about something new that he was releasing. And so I'm excited about new things coming with GI, or with Core Outdoor.
Sure.
And it's been very interesting to see how many other people are still excited about it, and how they're still working tirelessly, and how again, it's fun that the JT brand is still around and seeing this newfound popularity.
It really is. I'm glad. Like I love it. I love the logos. I've still got some of my old shirts from the 80s, like the hot pink with the old JT logo.
Nice.
And I still wear it.
It's funny because it's fun to see the different fan groups. It's fun to see what they appreciate, what they value, what all of that to me is very interesting, not just from the marketing side, but just from the fan side.
So you're not going to leak out anything cool that you're excited about that's coming?
I already sent you the pictures.
Lies. Now everybody's gonna start bugging me,
as
saying,
they should. He has all of the scoop, every bit of it. If he's not sharing with you, then he just doesn't like you.
All right, John. I know you're not one to be in front of the camera, so I guess I should let you retreat as gracefully as you can.
I'm glad we finally did this. Like I said, it's been a crazy year, but it's been an interesting year for paintball. I hope to see us come out the other side of this a little stronger, hopefully a little friendlier towards each other, but hopefully ready to play.
Well, just know that I'm here. I'm glad I finally got you on. I've been wanting this for a long time, as you know, because I send you messages every so many months. Like, so
I'm very glad you reminded me it was tonight.
Yeah, me too. But moving forward, if there's anything you ever want to talk about with regards to Core and new products coming out, whatever, I just like having passionate people on, and I'd love to hear anything that you want to share.
I appreciate it. Like I said, there's been so much. There's the custom program that they have going on with with gear like this shirt, where you can help design it yourself a little bit, where you can make low runs as low as stores can do as low as 10, so they can have their own logos on some of the same gear. It's a very interesting time, and it's neat to see.
It really is. Like I'm blown away with some of the stuff that's coming out now. And I think what amazes me the most, and I got to say this, and then I promise you I'll let you go, is I'm amazed at how even the lowest teams now have all matching jerseys. Like, I mean, I remember when we would get go to Mark's Work Warehouse and get like the heavy duty cotton full length t-shirts, and then just have stuff put on it just so we sort of look the same, and we all sort of wished we could have like the JT logo with our names and stuff on the back. And nowadays everybody's got full sponsors, custom camo, custom everything from like brands like Intensity and Under and whatnot. And I just look around, and it's like everybody looks like they're pro. Like just everybody looks like they're 100% pro. They're not, but they look the part.
It's good. It's fun that that is part of the culture that has changed. That we went from BDUs, and now it's definitely a more designer look culture of high-end paintball garments that have the built-in padding sometimes, or built-in ripstop protection, or the forearms that are designed so that they can hold up to grass and dirt and turf as you're sliding. It's a whole
Bounces.
new world. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And like I said, it's part of the experience now.
Right.
That you get dressed up in your paintball attire. It's not your jeans and your BDUs or a camouflage shirt from Walmart anymore.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much for being on. It was an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much again for helping out with those lenses. My niece loves those goggles. I can't even begin to tell you how much she loves them.
That was a while ago, but like I said, it was one of those little things, just passing something on to somebody else. It's one of the fun parts of paintball is that it definitely is a community.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have a great night. I'll remove you from the screen. Thank you so much. You sure there's nobody else you want to thank?
Like I said, there are definitely too many people through the years.
Too many to count, so screw them all.
Yeah. I read something recently that said that a lot of guys after 30 basically don't have friends anymore. That it's just uncommon that they have their family or that they have their work, but they don't have actual friends. And man, I've been very blessed throughout because of paintball. I've always had friends, always had people I wanted to see, always had people I wanted to talk to, always had a shared interest with them, even people I didn't know. So it has definitely changed my life for the better, having paintball and having that community and that just so many friends that people that don't even play or that have now come back to playing, or it is absolutely amazing of how many people that I've met through the years and keep track of. I don't keep track of anybody from high school. Don't keep track of anybody from college, really.
Yeah, nope, me neither.
But
screw them.
I have friends that I played with during those times that I still keep track of, that I'm interested in their families and their careers. And the last time that they got out to play, I think that's all. It's just instantly interesting, that with those friends and those people. And so even if they don't play anymore, there's still that bond.
Nice. All right, my friend. Well, thank you so much. You have a fantastic night, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully at the next big event.
Fair enough. Take care. Absolutely. Good luck with your podcast.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Take care.
All right, everybody. Well, that was my show for tonight. Thank you all so much. I was so glad to have him on. I can't even begin to tell you how much I like and admire John. He's yeah, like, I mean, his business card should literally say been there, done that. And yeah, in any case, thank you all so much for coming out. Thanks again to my sponsors, Vulcan, Mortal Air, Push, Transfuse, Ultra Silk, MacDev, obviously the Ali Remember Foundation. We can't forget about those. And I believe next week, now normally this is not something I do, but I believe next week that my guest is going to be Tracy Perez. If you don't know who she is, definitely tune in. She's one of paintball's leading ladies from behind the scenes, and she's got a lot going on in her life. And yeah, she's been one of the main faces behind paintball and the NXL for like 15 years, I believe it is. So it's going to be a really good show, and I'm really excited to have her on. Now, like I said, this is not something I normally do, talk about my next week's guest, because too much happens from time to time. But Tracy and I have been talking, and I'm really looking forward to having her on. So yeah, thank you all for coming out. And please, if you like this show, please go over to Patreon and support my podcast if you can. The tiers I have, I'm giving away stickers and t-shirts and hoodies. And the ones that are going to be from Patreon are going to be, I'm going to custom make them. They're going to be something absolutely special and different that you can only get from Patreon accounts. But yeah, I just want to grow this show, and I need your help because I'm getting to a point where I'm as good as I can get without your help. So if you can help out, please jump on Patreon and help if you can. And thank you all so much for coming in. In any case, it's my time to check out. So play with passion, everybody, and As always, keep your paint dry.